I would like to tell you a little bit how to use Microsoft Access database if you want to write queries or data modification statements or data definition language statements based on an existing database. Here I have an Access database. I double click to open it. And first of all, I point to this yellow ribbon that you see here. It's in Estonian, it's written in Estonian, but it says that there is a security warning and certain content has been disabled. And the system asks whether you want to allow the content or not. So you should enable the content so that you could execute all the SQL statements based on the database. This is a part of security mechanism of Microsoft Office package because, as you know, in Microsoft Office package, you could create macros in different programs. So these macros automate work. Of course, you could use these macros for many good things, but it could also be that someone with bad intentions creates a macro that does something bad or inappropriate. And because of that, certain active content of a file is by default disabled, and you have to enable the content. And in case of databases that you use for practicing SQL statements, I suggest you to actually enable the content. Now, the system asks from you, do you want to make this as a trusted document? And you should answer yes, that it is a trusted document. Now, before you can proceed with writing SQL statements, you should make sure that the font size in the window where you are going to execute SQL statements is big enough. So here, this big menu, it is called ribbon. And from this ribbon, you have to select the menu file. And from here, you should select options, file and options. And this kind of window with access options will pop up. And here you should go to the section Object Designers. And now here in this Object Designers, there is a subsection with the name Query Design. And here under the Query Design, you can determine what is the font and font size in the window where you can execute SQL statements. By default, the font size is 8. And I can assure you that 8 is really a very small font size. And with such small font size, it is very easy to miss something important. It's very easy to make some syntax error or semantic error. And therefore, my suggestion to you is that you should determine that the font size is somewhere between 16 and 20. This is an appropriate size because in this case, it's still, if you write even quite a long SQL statement, all the statement fits on one screen. So it's easy to read it and comprehend it. You do not have to change it in case of each and every file. This is something that you change based on a computer. So if in your computer you change it once, then you do not have to change it again and again if you open some new file or some file that you have already used. Secondly, please also make sure that there is this checkbox marked SQL Server compatible syntax ANSI 92, this database. In case of databases that I will give to you, this checkbox has been marked. If you create a new database from scratch, then please make sure that you mark this selection, that you mark this box, because it will ensure that the SQL dialect that you can use in Microsoft Access is a little bit more powerful and a little bit more compatible with SQL standard. This 1992 is actually a very old version of SQL standards. However, it's still very relevant in the sense that even nowadays there are certain features that were already described in these old SQL standard versions that current most of the current database management systems, or even all the current database management systems, do not implement. It's actually quite an important measuring stick that at least the SQL dialect that is supported by the database management system more or less conforms to the ICO 1992 standard version of SQL. It means that it has this kind of most basic and most core elements of a language present. Also, if you select from here current database, then you can see that I have ticked here with selection compact and close. Again, in case of databases that I give to you, I have ticked it or selected it. If you create a new database from scratch, then make sure that you mark it, because it will ensure that if you close the database file, then automatically the system compacts the database file, and it makes sure that the database file will not grow too big, because otherwise it could grow quite big, even if you have quite a few tables and only a small amount of this data in your database. After you have checked that, you can proceed. And first of all, if you have to write queries, or if you have to make database modifications, if you have to modify data, or if you have to change the structure of the database. And of course, first of all, you have to know what is the structure of the database. So in case of Microsoft Access, there is this built-in tool that you can use if you select from here database tools, and here click on the button relationships. And here you can see the description of database. You can see tables. You can see names of tables. So if I look here, then hotel, room backup, these are the names of a table. These are the names of columns. The order of columns in the table is the same as the order of here from top to bottom. If a column belongs to the primary key, then there is the key sign in front of a column name. So you should know that primary key value must be present in each and every row of a table, and primary key value must be unique in case of each and every row of a table. Here you can see that there are tables that have composite primary keys. So table room has a composite primary key that consists of 2 columns, and table reservation has a composite primary key that consists of 4 columns. And these lines here between tables, these that have these one-to-many signs at the end of lines, these indicate that foreign key constraints have been defined in the database, and therefore the database management system will ensure that the data that is recorded in the tables, it satisfies this referential integrity rule. So in the table room, only such hotel numbers can be registered that exist in the table hotel. Or in the table reservation, only such guest numbers can be registered that are also registered in the table guest. Also, please pay attention here that there is a foreign key that is a composite foreign key. So in the table reservation, hotel number and room number, this is a composite foreign key. And this composite foreign key refers to a composite candidate key in the table room. That is the composite primary key here. By the way, it will mean that if in your queries you have to join tables, room and reservation, then actually in the join condition you have to write two sub-conditions, one for hotel number and another for room number. So a room number alone is not unique. Room number is unique in combination with hotel number. And one more thing to consider, if, for instance, you have to search data about reservations, and you have to check, you have to restrict the data based on the data that is in the table hotel. Then you do not necessarily have to join the table room. Because you can actually join directly table reservation with a table hotel, because the structure of a database and enforced constraints make sure that in the table reservation you can have only such hotel numbers that are also present in the table hotel. So if you do not have to ask data from a table room for some reason, then in this case you do not have to touch or access a table room, but you can directly join table reservation with a table hotel. And double click here on this relationship type will show you what are the properties of this foreign key constraint, including what are the compensating actions that are defined here. So enforce referential integrity means that the system checks referential integrity rule in case of this foreign key. And here these checkboxes indicate that whether there is on update cascade and whether there is on delete cascade compensatory actions. By default, if these boxes are not ticked, it means on update no action and on delete no action. And this on update no action and on delete no action means that actually the database management system itself does not compensate referential integrity errors. So if there is data modification that causes a violation of a referential integrity rule, then the database management system from its part will not compensate it, and therefore the data modification will fail. Now, in order to start to write queries, you should select from here this menu create. And here you can see that in order to start writing SQL queries, you have to click here on this button, Query Design. And there is also this query wizard where you can answer some questions and the system generates your answers. But we're not going to use this query wizard, but instead we select query design. So whatever SQL statement you want to write in Microsoft Access, whether it is select statement, whether it is create statement, alter drop statement, or whether it is some data modification statement, you should select from here query design. Now, if you click here query design, then this kind of window will pop up. And this is actually this kind of graphical interface where you can create data manipulation language statements, meaning select, insert, update, delete statements. This is not something that is specific to Microsoft Access. Actually, this graphical interface here implements a graphical software language or database language that is called query by example. And this query by example language was invented already in 1970s. And the idea is that I can use this kind of graphical interface in order to construct a database query. And then I can execute the query, or I can translate the query that has been created by using this visual interface, I can translate it into SQL and perhaps also vice versa. And such interface or very similar interface has been implemented in many different programs that can be used in order to access databases of many different database management systems. So this is definitely not something that you can only see in case of Microsoft Access. And in case of your task, it's entirely permitted that if you want, you can actually use this query designer in order to create your queries. Now, if you do not want to use this query designer initially, then you can select from here close. And here from this top left corner, you can actually select that, okay, you want to move between different views of this database object. So by default, you are in the design view. But if you want to go to the SQL view where you can write the SQL code, then you should select from here SQL view. And this is the interface where you can start writing SQL queries. Now, a couple of comments about the interface that you see here. It is absolutely true that this interface here is not very user-friendly. For instance, you do not see line numbers. You cannot use here any comments. You only have this black and white color, so the system does not display you different parts of a statement in different colors. For instance, keywords with one color, literals with another color, identifiers with a third color. It's also not possible to check the balance of brackets. And very importantly, you also cannot execute multiple statements one after another. So my suggestion to you is that if you if you use Microsoft Access, then use programming, then use a text editor that is meant for programmers. And of course, there are many different text editors that do exactly that are used exactly for that purpose. But for instance, I can suggest you Scintilla text editor and also Notepad++. And both these tools are freely available. You can download these from the internet, and they should also be available in the computer classes. Now here, if you open with Scintilla text editor or Notepad++, then from here, in case of Notepad++, you can select language, yes, and you can select SQL. So you tell to the system that, okay, I want now in this file, I am going to write the SQL code. And here I also can select language and SQL. And what it does, it will adjust the editor so that the editor is able to display you the statements in this language in the best possible way. So for instance, if I write here, select all from hotel, a very simple statement that you can write in SQL, when you can see that now keywords are with one color, identifiers are with another color, special symbols are with another color. And for instance, if I write here where total number equals 1, then you can see that these literals, this one here is a sequence of symbols that denotes an integer value. These are yet in another color. Here you can also see line numbers. And for instance, if I use brackets, then the system is able to check the balance of brackets. So let's say or city equals, let's say, Tallinn. And now here I can check the balance of brackets. So, okay, for instance, if I put here this brackets, then it's already visually understandable to me that, okay, this closing bracket was missing here. So this kind of functionality is available here. So I suggest you to, first of all, or write this statement in Notepad++ or in Scintilla text editor. So similar features. Okay, I can select from here view line numbers. And again, I can check the balance of brackets, and I have this coloring here that different parts of a statement with different colors. And just to remind you that I have to select from here language SQL, and I have to select from here language SQL to tell to the system that the code that I write here is the SQL code. And here I can write the comment. And these comments, I cannot write these comments here, because if I put the comment here, I cannot execute the statement, I cannot save a statement. But if you write your statements in a separate file, and then just copy and paste these statements here, then now you can execute the statement. So in order to execute the statements, there are multiple possible ways to execute the select statement. So one possible way is that you select from a menu design. And from here, you click on this exclamation on this button with a red exclamation mark, execute. And if you go back from here, SQL view. So execute, SQL view. So design menu, execute, and back SQL view. If you have select statement, when in order to execute the select statement, you can also select from here datasheet view. It actually executes the select statement. So datasheet view, SQL statement, datasheet view, SQL statement. And also you can use shortcut keys. So I have this Estonian keyboard, Control, comma, and Control dot, Control, comma, Control dot, Control, comma, Control dot, Control, comma, Control dot. So I can move between different views of a query. So SQL view and datasheet view. So Control, comma, Control dot. So if you want in Microsoft Access execute these select statements, specifically select statements, then you can also use these shortcut keys. So once more, if I put here this comment here, I cannot execute the statement, or I put it here, I cannot execute the statement. And similarly, I cannot save a statement if I have here this comment. Comment. Also, I cannot write and execute here multiple statements one after another. So if I write here two statements one after another, let's say select from hotel, select from room, I try to execute it, it does not work. So in Microsoft Access, there is this principle that one query window and one SQL statement. So now if I want to execute multiple statements, then one possibility is that, okay, I write my statements in to a separate file. I copy these statements one after another to this window to execute these. Another possibility is that I can actually save a query. So I click here, save, and now I can save the query. And one important thing to consider when you save a query is that actually the query objects and table objects or tables belong to the same namespace in Microsoft Access, meaning that the query name cannot be the same as the table name, and the table name cannot be the same as the query. So if I try to give to the query name hotel when it does not work because there is already table hotel in the database. So instead, I should use some unique name that is not the same as the name of some table. And as you can see, now I have here in this part of the window where I can see all the access objects. I have also this subsection queries, and here is a query with the name currently tasks1. So Control W closes the window, or I can just close this window if I click here. And now if I double click on it, it opens the query. If I click on it and click open, it opens the query. If I click here and select design view, then I can see the SQL code. If I want to rename a query, then I can do it here, but of course the query has to be closed. The query object has to be closed. And one important thing to consider is that if you create a query and save it, and it's a select query, so you search date, when essentially this saved select statement is a view. So a view is a named table, and the data in this table is calculated based on another data in the database. So this view is actually a derived table, and the value of a derived value table is calculated based on our data in our tables. So essentially, if you create a select statement and save it and give name to the select statement, then you create a query here. And one important strategy that you can, and useful strategy that you can use in case of writing queries and solving tasks is that if you have some more complicated task, then instead of trying to write one statement that could be quite complicated, you could actually try to decompose the task into smaller subtasks. And you can solve these smaller subtasks with the help of separate queries. And then you can write a final query that combines the data in all these queries to find the final result. So if I create another query, then actually you see I can right here select from task 1, I can make a query based on this derived table. I can make a query based on this view that I have created here. For instance, I can now write something like that. That as number of hotels, and I execute the query, and I see that the number of hotels that satisfy this condition here, but the number of such hotels is 4. So of course, here in this case, this task is so simple that there is no need to create multiple different queries. However, in case of more complicated tasks, it would be actually pretty useful. It could be pretty useful to solve a task with the help of multiple statements. And in case of using your database, when these tables that are in your disposal, that you can use in these tables, you can freely change date in any way as you want. So it is not prohibited. It's not prohibited to do so. So if you just double click on a table, then you can add some new row to the table. And if you activate here a row and press delete key, then you can delete the row. And here you can also modify a row. And in order to save a row, you can go to another row or press here on this save button. So these are some of things that you should know if you start using Microsoft Access in order to write SQL statements, and you have some predefined database based on that you have to solve the SQL tasks.